All right, Whitney, it's all you.
All right. Hold on. Let me.
Give me one second.
Let me know when you're ready for me.
We should be live right now.
All right. I guess we're ready.
Let me double check. Yep, we're live.
Live on Facebook. I see it now. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Sorry, we're starting a little bit late. You know how things are with tech issues nowadays. My name is Whytni Kernodle. I am one of the steering committee members of Arlington for Justice. I'm here with Yolande. I can let her introduce herself a little bit and then maybe talk a little bit about our guest tonight. Yolande, do you want to introduce yourself and maybe talk about what we're going to be doing? Not necessarily just today, but what we're hoping to get done with these series and the types of conversations that we hope to have.
Yeah, awesome. My name is Yolande, also a founding steering committee member with Arlington for Justice. The idea behind these meetings is really to just have casual conversations that are educational, but that also shine light on issues that are happening here in our backyard of Arlington, so that you as community members, residents, families could be able to learn and understand what's actually happening, but also to have an inside view into what you guys can do to help as well.
Great, thank you. So today we have with us two really esteemed guests. We're really happy, especially for the launching of our series, to have both Arron Gregory, who is the new, oh gosh, is it CEIDO? Is it EIDO? IEDO?
CDEIO.
Okay, Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer for Arlington Public Schools. We welcome him here. He just came in January, I believe it was. And so he's certainly new and certainly challenging times in general. But thank you. We're really excited to have you here in Arlington and certainly here tonight. And we also have Brad Haywood, who is the public defender in Arlington and Falls Church. He is also a member of the steering committee of Arlington for Justice, and he is our handyman with data and real experience handling some of the issues that are important to us, particularly when it comes to racial injustice and policing. And so what we're going to do tonight, we welcome all comments, but what we're going to do tonight is we're going to start just a chat, talking to Arron. As many of you know, Arron has started a series, I believe starting this summer, a series called Let's Talk. I'm going to actually read what the first Let's Talk Critical Conversations Student Summer Series. It says, the violent killings coupled with the historic brutality imposed on African Americans by law enforcement and unified protests in cities across the nation and the world calling attention have had a profound impact on many of the students in our community. Students across the country are being asked to examine their identities, reflect on their biased behaviors, and learn new ways to challenge racism, bias, and bullying within themselves, on others, and in society. The students are demanding a call of action from the adults. So I want to thank you, first of all, for doing this challenging work, coming here. Obviously, it's unfortunate that in 2020 that Arlington needs this type of work to be done, but at least we're at the point where we're facing it. And I really appreciate you doing that. So what we want to ask you right now is, what was your impetus behind the Let's Talk series, more so than what I just read? How you're actually hoping quantitatively or actually to serve our students in this context, and what can we do as a community in order to help facilitate your work?
Sure. So thanks for having me. I appreciate it. In the conversations that we've had the last couple of days, to really kind to be me a thought partner in the process. So I appreciate the conversation. Let's Talk really stemmed before the student series. The first Let's Talk was back in June, and it was stemming from the homicide of George Floyd. And we were reaching out and hearing from our community, from our teachers, from our staff. They say, hey, we need to talk about having these discussions. We need to learn how to talk about race, learn how to talk about racism. How do we become an anti-racist school system? So of course they came to me and said, hey, we need to, first of all, look at our infrastructure that was created by George Mason University several years ago. One of the recommendations was to have these kind of community town halls, or these community discussions was probably recommendation number one. So what we did is that we formed a panel. It was myself, this new superintendent who had just been there maybe about a week, Dr. Arron. We also had Tanya Talento, who's a board chair. We also had a facilitator, a moderator, and she was one of the equity and excellence coordinators. We had our esteemed teacher of the year, Antoinette Waters, who was an African-American historian to heart, on the panel as well. And we also had one of our students. And we had a discussion. How do we have these kind of conversations about race? How do we have these candid conversations with our students? How do we make sure that we do no harm? So what we did is we also started with norms. So we always start with norms. And one of the norms were really around the 4 cornerstones of courageous conversations. So that's how we start with our students, and also how we start with our staff and having these conversations. Went well. We had last count probably over 5,000 or 6,000 views. There was a lot more comments and questions that we could even answer. And one of the things that we are looking at doing is looking through those commented questions and making sure that no question goes unanswered, but to be able to answer those questions. We also added resources onto the Chief Diversity or Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion page for families and resources for staff. But then we also know that we also need to provide support to our staff. So when students come back, how do they continue to have these conversations? These are not one and done conversations. This is not an event. These are programs as we move forward that we have to continue the conversations to educate our students. And that's really how it began. So the first one was Let's Talk, and we had the students grouped by age. There was a middle school session as well as a high school session. And to allow them to be able to explore and understand, hey, what are we seeing on TV? What's going on nationally right now and why? And giving them an open, safe space and a forum to be able to have that open dialogue. And we had many people that were on to support that conversation. The second one is, okay, we have to address the issues of systemic racism and policing. And that's kind of where we are now with session number 2. That session has not been canceled, but it's been postponed. One of the things that I learned even through feedback, and again, as a thought partner talking to you, Whytni, is that these conversations are so complex, you really need more than an hour's worth of time to be able to delve deeply. And we had so much support from community stakeholders and a very esteemed number of adults that wanted to reach out to partake in this discussion with our students, to give them the adequate amount of time to be able to dig deep. We had a sociologist, university level professor, who's better been known as being the Cornell West of the Midwest, Dr. Rodney Coates, who's going to facilitate the discussion. We had some officers as well. You have to have them as part of the conversation when we're talking about policing and their voices being heard. We had Leanne Roselle, who's with the county now. She's on loan from the Annie D. Casey Foundation for Restore Arlington. And if she's here for a reason, right? If we need to restore Arlington, then there must be something that we need to restore. So it's important to have her as part of that conversation. There's also the initiative of Black and blue uniforms. And it was an initiative out of Howard, started at Howard University. And it's a set of attorneys from Howard that have formed this partnership. They were part of the conversation. So we had a multitude of different partners to help support, and also established a good partnership with the multimedia company who are running PSAs, who are there to support, to give our kids a voice, and said, hey, anytime they want to be heard, be talked to, they have access to our podcast, they have access to our website. So we're really forming really good partnerships to make sure that we're able to have these courageous conversations with our students. So I'll take a pause right now.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think I have a few follow-up questions to that, but I'd love to give Brian Stockton a chance to introduce himself as well, since he just hopped on.
Thank you so much. I'm Brian Stockton. I'm the new Chief of Staff here at Arlington Public School System. I actually work closely with Arron, actually even before I came, Arron was contacting me 2 weeks before, kind of just talked about everything that was going on. And then he talked to me about today's meeting. And we were actually working on a equity policy for APS right now. And he mentioned this meeting. I said, you know what? I said, well, what time is it? I said 6 o'clock. I'm there with you. So I just kind of wanted to kind of join in and listen in at the same time, and also kind of be helpful if I could as well. Because again, we're trying to do some great work over here. We're trying to be, I'm trying to support Arron's work, and just also just make sure we're serving everyone like they want to be served, and meet them where they are. And so again, I'm only 5 days in, but at the same time, I'm jumping right in to see how we can help out. And I just want to be part of the conversation. Anika, Anika? I see Anika and Yolande. Your name is?
Yeah, so our Zoom is just called Anika and Yolande, but my name is Yolande. Anika's my wife. So
Okay.
it's called. But yeah, one of the reasons that we actually, Brad, can you introduce yourself? We'll touch base on the why later.
Hey, Brad.
Hey, Brad Haywood. I'm the Chief Public Defender for Arlington County and City of Falls Church, and I'm also the Executive Director of Justice Forward Virginia.
Okay, great.
Did you need more from me at this juncture?
Oh, no.
No.
I'm happy to chime in.
No,
I'm full of words all the time.
Whytni?
So yeah, thank you. So one of the things that we talked about is that words matter, like Brad says, and communication face to face oftentimes is the best way to really talk about complex things, as we've all noticed. One of the reasons why we're here today is because a little bit of what had come out to the public and certainly to different organizations was disconcerting, to say the least, about what was going to be handled. And so again, from outsider point of view, obviously, we definitely know, especially for those of you, I mean, you two are brand new. And so you certainly didn't create this problem, and you certainly came and hope to solve it. But the problem has existed, and there's a lot of trust issues, which you're probably finding out based on the fact that it's 2020 and we're just finally getting to the point where we're restoring and realizing that we need equity and diversity and inclusion. So you've got your work cut out for you. But as we keep saying, that we definitely want to work. We work with the police, we work with the schools, we work with the Commonwealth Attorney's Office, with the PD's office, different groups. What we really want is justice. So thank you so much. But what was disconcerting is that, and I recognize after talking to Arron at length, that there was a hyperlink that showed that some of the issues about policing that were going to be talked about were coming from different articles. But the way that it read to an outsider, and certainly to me, was one of the things that was a major red flag, for lack of a better word, was the fact that the police were trying to explain why they didn't believe that there was discrimination against Black people in policing. And we are lucky enough to be at a point in Arlington that that's an actual non-starter for a lot of people, right? So that's good. But those are the types of things. We really are at a point where there are many of us who have been progressive, actually progressive for years. There are people who believe themselves to be progressive and are just finding out that maybe they were a little faux progressive and are now sort of turning a little bit. And so we want absolutely to work with the schools, with the police, but we feel very strongly that we have to come from a place where I had talked to Arron, that one of the things that really I really loved about Dr. Duran, his first email out to parents, within a week or so of him coming in June, he talked about George Floyd, he talked about racism, and he talked about our need to protect Black people and Black children. And I felt that that was a great first step as a new superintendent. And so giving you guys the benefit of the doubt is why we reached out to you and said, we're concerned with some of this language and we need to figure out why it's there. We're also concerned, we understand that the police on panels, but we're also concerned about the amount of policing whether it was actually balanced. And after talking to Arron and hearing about, as he's right, he created a very esteemed panel. We also have someone like the public defender, chief public defender here, who's excellent at these, because we keep pulling him into them. So, those were the issues that many of us had as families and as parents and as advocates.
Sure.
But the silver lining of all of that is it's facilitated more conversation, face-to-face, digitally, conversation between us. And so I think maybe, Brad told us who he is, but one of the things that we know that maybe you guys have heard, maybe you don't, but face-to-face with someone who lives it and breathes it every day, is some of the data on racism in policing in Arlington. So Brad.
Sure. All right. So I'll just tell you my perspective in general, and then I'll get to some of the numbers. I'm troubled with our local police department, and I'm troubled by, I think, some of the people who are expected to hold them accountable, because the attitude of our police department is that it seems to me, I might be wrong about this, it seems to me that they think that they're above all of the problems that are being discussed in the world right now in terms of problems with policing. And they absolutely aren't. All of the same problems that exist in Minneapolis or Portland or Chicago, they exist here. They exist in a different way because our county's different, our demographics are different, the types of crimes that occur here are different, but the same structural problems, the same problems at the foundation of our justice system exist here just as much as anywhere else. And the crazy thing to me is we have so much evidence, and it's coming at us all the time, and somehow it just keeps being brushed aside. Like, nope, I'm going to make an explanation for this, and I'll just go down through some of it. In the past 5 years, Arlington police, 2 people have been killed by Arlington police. Another one has been shot in a manner that probably should have killed him. All 3 of those incidences of deadly force being used were the officers were exonerated by by investigators that were within the police department or the Commonwealth Attorney's Office. None of the investigations were independent. None of them were reviewed by independent agencies. None of the there was no transparency at all with those incidents. In addition, earlier this year, the Arlington police, after the Commonwealth's attorney, Chris Tapty, won an election where she said she wasn't going to prosecute possession of marijuana, the Arlington police thought it would be a great idea to enter into a contract with the Virginia National Guard for drug interdiction services. And in this contract, the #1 drug that is mentioned was cannabis. So when the community says, we don't want to prosecute the war on drugs, the police department says, we do, and we're going to. And it's brazen and it's audacious, and no one said a peep. It just seemed like it was just fine to the people who were in the role of decision makers. We had the incident 2 months ago, I guess about almost at this point, at Lafayette Square. Don't need to say much about that, other than that we had Arlington police in SWAT gear standing in Lafayette Square using tear gas to disperse a crowd that was peacefully or lawfully protesting the murder of Black Americans at the hands of police. To this day, even though we've decriminalized pot, Arlington police are still standing by arrests for pot possession. I had one just today I learned about. Someone was arrested in May for pot possession. The prosecutor immediately dismissed it, just thought it was ridiculous. The cops haven't given up, though, because they still want to do that. And now that gets us now to probably the most alarming, and this was the question that was asked of me, is the racial disparities. Because this is I think the number, I mean, it's why we're talking tonight. And it is, I think, probably the top evidence of why the Arlington Police Department needs to do a lot of self-reflection, and we need to insist on a lot of reform. So in Arlington County, Virginia, Black people make up about maybe 8 or 9% of the county. 60% of the people who were arrested for pot possession are Black or were Black. About 50% of the people arrested for driving on a suspended license, Black. 54% of the people arrested for obstruction of justice, also often known as contempt of cop, Those are very frequently law enforcement and citizen interactions that are simply about the authority of the police officer. 54% of those instances involve Black individuals. 58% of this unique Arlington crime called failure to identify yourself to law enforcement, 58% of the people arrested for that offense, that ridiculous offense, are Black. 57% of those arrested for disorderly conduct are Black. 68% of those in Arlington arrested for trespassing are Black. And I know since we're here regarding juvenile cases, the same disparities apply in that realm. In Arlington County, 53% of the juveniles who are arrested in the juvenile system, you come through the court system, 53% of them are Black. It's so bad in our county that we don't even count Latinx people. The county police do not count them. They do not even know. I mean, I can tell you the racial disparities for Black Arlingtonians. I can't tell you what they are for Latinx Arlingtonians because the police don't care. They don't keep that data. And it's crazy, and they still don't. When you talk to them about why these disparities exist, they always turn to the same thing. And you can look on the county police website right now. Their explanation for these disparities is, oh, all these people we're arresting come from somewhere else, as if that is better. Don't you think that there are white people from outside of Arlington who also hang out in Arlington County? But only the Black outsiders, I guess, are the ones that Arlington see fit to arrest. And by the way, many of those disparities come from traffic stops. And as we all know, I think there is a saying, you all know it, driving while Black. That is where racial disparities start in our justice system. I think that is one of the main sources of racial disparities in arrest statistics. So this is why I get fired up about this issue. And a lot of things you see, the evidence you see, like you see with George Floyd and others, that evidence isn't always here because we don't have as many arrests. We don't have this extremely tragic, visible instance of police excessive force. It doesn't happen all the time here, but everything else happens. All the stuff, all those little building blocks that lead up to that very worst symptom of our broken system, all those things exist here, and we got to address them, or we're going to continue along the same path. So
the 58% that are prosecuted because failure to produce an ID, are they dropped in court, or is the officer stating a crime, or they stating why they investigated? Can you tell me a little bit more about that, Brad?
Yeah, so this is a crazy thing, and it needs to be written out of the Arlington Code. It's a crime that exists in less than 10 Virginia jurisdictions out of I think 113. It was enacted in the 60s, oddly, during a similar time period during civil rights protests. It was mostly like wealthy white Arlingtonians who didn't want protesters loitering in areas together, because often they wouldn't say who they are. So they passed an ordinance that made it illegal for them not to say their name to police. It was enacted for that purpose. What it has become, though, is a way to lock up mostly homeless people, mostly homeless mentally ill people. So you find a homeless person who's hanging out at the airport. He's paranoid, doesn't want to say who he is. The police officer then arrests that person and takes him to court for it. They stand by those. They don't drop them. That's a jailable offense in Arlington, and it's nuts. Parissa is doing a much better job with them, but they were not at all lenient with them under Theo's regime, and they were viewed just like any other jailable misdemeanor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. They so when you all reached out to Arron, basically it was a situation of, I'm trying, like I said, I wanted to join because you told me it was happening at 6 o'clock today. But when you all reached out to Arron, Brad, Whytni, and Yolande, basically it was because the police were speaking there. Am I correct in assuming that, or correct?
Yeah, and I'll give some context to that. Just before you joined the call, Whytni gave some context, but I guess in short, APS had their Let's Talk series, student series, and helping students to really understand what's going on and help them to think through it and have better information. Mm-hmm. I think what we really struggled with, and what community members who are emailing Arlington for Justice really struggled with, and Whytni and I as Black parents, is that we're not by allowing police to speak on, say, something like why they don't believe that disparities exist between the treatment of Black people and others, that just allows us to misinform very malleable minds, right? Without providing them the information like what Brad just said, without really educating them within the schools. We don't have enough education for what's happening in terms of racial disparities or what even has happened in the past to cause them. So, when these kids are listening to someone who is an authority figure say these things, it shapes their minds in a way that may not be providing them truthful information. So I think for us, our main reach out was to kind of provide the opportunity for this discussion where Arron and you, Brian, and Carolyn can kind of chat to us and Arlington residents around what was the thought, what you guys aim to really do, but also provide Brad as a kind of data point to help provide that hardcore data information.
So I'm going to go ahead and chime in now, so I can kind of give you the backdrop in terms of the why. Okay, so one of the things, and what I appreciate is that there's 3 other people on the panel I know of that has gone to law school like myself, and one of the things is being in law school is something called the Socratic method. The Socratic method was something in school that I hated. I didn't understand the why behind it, but basically the Socratic method is every time you ask a question, you would never get a response from the professor, and their answer was, "So what do you think?" And I know that they can both shake their head. They can, both to shake their head about that. The role of an educator is not to teach students what to think, but is to teach them how to think and how to critically think. So the content was an article before you can even address, racism within the police department. You got to understand the thinking behind it. Why? Why do these officers feel the way they do? That's one of the narrative, but there's a counter narrative too, right? So then there's also some other articles and material that were there as content, as background information, so that we can have a more robust conversation with students to kind of give them an idea in terms of what is the thinking about systemic racism within the police department, and what is the counter narrative in terms of officers that believe that there is systemic racism. And then there was data, right? So it's also a teachable and learnable moment for them within the content of looking at some of the data. There was polling data, there was all kinds of data. And then the objective was for them to be able to look back and reflect upon their own previous understanding as we move forward. Now, how did your thinking and understanding change based upon the information that you received? So there were student objectives, and then there's also content to kind of give them background information in terms of the problem. Because not everyone is enlightened, not everyone is woke. So we have to enlighten and wake up everyone to the context of what the issues really are. So that if you actually looked at the content, the information in terms of the blurb came from the content. And so without changing the content, that was information that was kind of a background in terms of what the article was. So kind of like a theme of the article. And then there's also an op-ed piece, which was a video, which was officers talking about why did they become police officers? Well, peace officers, right, is really what they're supposed to be, which is to serve and protect. Is everyone doing that? If not, then we have some concerns. So it's really to kind of give them information so they can kind of dig a little bit deeper into their thought process. Then there was a third series, really, and the third series was really around social justice for social change. That's where you take action. So we also have to teach our students how to be responsible with social media, because they're all social media. Black Lives Matter started from a hashtag, right? The hashtag to movement. So this was really as a platform to get them to think so that they can know how to use their voices as we move more towards school. It wasn't a stopping point, but really a beginning point to start the conversation, because you cannot have a finality in a discussion around racism within an hour. And we know that. So it's really about the introduction in terms of what is the problem? What do we need to solve? Because as we approach school and during the summertime, there's going to be more interaction between students of color and the police. There's going to be more interaction. You know, Arlington does not exist in a bubble. There's DMV, right? So kids are in DC, kids are in Maryland. They're all our kids. Kids come here and they go out and go back and forth. So we need to be able to provide them with that information, how to keep them safe, how to keep them safer. So that's really the reason behind the content. Unfortunately, with communications, is that there's only so much content that you can add on a page. So all that information you aren't able to see, which hopefully now you have better context in terms of what that content was. To hope that, you know, that as we go forward, because we are going to move back to this conversation, we cannot not have this conversation, and police have to be part of that conversation. So I'm hoping that kind of gives some a bigger picture in terms of the insight.
That does. Thank you. And I just want to also give Carolyn Jackson some opportunity to come in. Thank you so much. I know she was running from meeting to meeting, so it's great that she also honored us with our presence. So Ms. Carolyn, you have a very specific, you know, understanding of a lot of these issues as an APS administrator, as a former police officer, as the mother of Black children, Black boys in Arlington. So we'd love to hear your perspective.
Okay, well, thank you. It's good to see everybody. And I apologize for being late, but I'm not quite sure what Bradley was talking when I came in. And so I'm not quite sure how much of it I missed. So I'm coming from a place of feeling like I might have missed something as in the opening. But the one thing I will share is that coming from a mindset and the experiences of growing up in Arlington, coming through Arlington Public Schools, wearing the badge in Arlington, and being an administrator in Arlington, you know, I see things in many different lights. So we have disparities. It's not just with the police. So I love that Bradley has those hard numbers that we're making the police department look at, because I was part of that team. And I can tell you, just like we look at education and we look at police, we look at housing, we look at hiring practices, we look at mental health, it's the same disparities throughout. So the general statements sometimes are you know, hard to listen to because it's not all police. And for me, I think Arron and I haven't gone in depth with this when he planned it, but in the spirit of helping students understand different perspectives, but also not to fear the people that are in the school that are supposed to be there to support them, and they're not all bad. And so I don't want students walking away. They see the images, they know the bad stuff, but I don't want them to see that's the only narrative that we're expressing. That's all. And to me, the content of the presentation itself, yes, I believe we were reflective after we talked yesterday to some members of the NAACP. An hour is not a lot of time to unpack 7 objectives. So I think that was taken to heart with a good understanding that maybe we need to look at it in a different way, and then think about the developmental capacity of some of our young students, especially if they're just unpacking this for the first time and not having those conversations at home, and relying on social media and relying on what their friends are telling them. We want to turn this into an educational moment for not just the students, for families too. And so I think it's two-sided. It's not heavy. It wasn't meant to be heavy on one side, like we back the police and all their actions, because that is so untrue. I mean, we all know that's not true. And that's nationally, and that's here in Arlington. And I can speak because I walked the walk. I was one of those officers. So I hope in the spirit of that, and sorry again if I missed some of the other stats that Bradley was communicating to us, but all the other disparities also are impacting our kids. And so we can just start peeling this onion away. That's going to be the most powerful thing to do. Maybe the timing on this wasn't right. Maybe we could have had some more collaboration and kind of, you know, unpacked it a little bit differently. But this collaborative effort right here is meaningful. But I don't want to go into a conversation, it's them against us. not when we're trying to educate. That's not what we want to do. So that was my 5-minute soapbox speech. Hope I didn't piss anybody off in the meantime, but I'm passionate about this stuff. I'm passionate about this stuff.
I appreciate your passion. Bradley was, really, give me some background and give me some statistics. You caught on. You.
Okay, I just hope I didn't miss too much of it.
No, you're fine.
And I know where Parissa stands. Parissa and I have had long conversations about this, and so yeah, I'm quite aware of where we are with the numbers and everything.
Can I chime in real quick?
Of course.
So I agree dialogue's really important, and I respect the interest in trying to promote dialogue. I just like the way where I started with my speech, and is something like what bothers me about our local police department is they don't come to the table in a spirit of humility. And you got to be in that place. If you're gonna come to grips with the fact that it's step one, so you got to admit you got a problem, right?
Right, that's developmental. If the leadership is not having those conversations and that training is not the priority, that is going to be the mindset of a lot of the police officers, because that's historically that's how it's paramilitary, and historically that's how they operate. If you don't have the correct or the intentional professional learning to educate people. So it doesn't come naturally. They don't walk into their uniform and they don't go through the academy. And that's what the things that are on their priority for the most part. I wish it was. I love that there's talk about changing the way we operate, because they don't walk into their job. I bet you there's very few questions, even on a job interview, about what are your equitable practices and how you view the world, what's your mindset when you come into it. I'm sure it's not.
Yeah. I mean, I just think it's pervasive in our local police department. And when I see a agenda that's only police officers, I just personally get worried that they probably talked to the brass. They probably had their marching orders about what to say. And probably it wasn't going to be a totally self-reflective, humble presentation. It was going to be more like, we are going to defend ourselves. Like, stop it, Like, if we're gonna make progress, you gotta connect with each other, you gotta listen to each other, you gotta admit you might be doing some stuff wrong. Like that's my feeling about that.
Okay.
We're not always going to agree on everything, and it's in the spirit of we have to learn how to be agreeable. So I can say is that the people that were not part of a panel, but again, who are there to support, they were vetted. We have someone that was SRO within the building, and we also had leadership, because there are some questions that would probably be pertaining to leadership that the SROs wouldn't be able to answer. So that was the reason why it may appear had been heavy, but they all have different roles within the local police department to be able to answer specific questions. And the key objective is to make sure that any and all questions that any student had was able to be answered by the people that were available to support. So I think that we have to have the conversations. I think it's crucial. Some of the students that we have may wind up working in law enforcement one day. Some of them may wind up being attorneys someday. Some of them may wind up being public defenders someday. So it's so important to be able to give both sides and the perspective, and for everyone to see that in 2020, we were dealing with this back in 1960s. We've been dealing with this back in the days of Jim Crow and those kind of things, and get the historical perspective too of policing in our society. And there's a lot of conversations about whether or not there is really a problem, but to be able to bring it to the forefront. I think what I'm liking about right now is that we see sustained movement. We're seeing that, after another life has been lost, is that this is sustained movement by the young people, and we have to keep that fire going, but in a positive way. And that's the reason why we know that, again, how do we use social media for social change and be positive with it, because that's where the students are. So I agree with everything that everyone has here to say. I'd like to hear more from you all and kind of take the back seat in terms of how we can move forward. And I think it's be a great partnership and great allies within this group to be able to spark conversation. And more than, I'm more than happy to have any of you to be available when we have these conversations with our students. So I appreciate just being here and listening. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for that. And I said to Whytni earlier this week, she's also one of the founding members of Black Parents of Arlington, who I feel should 100% be fully involved in this series and planning sessions and things like that. But I love everything that everyone has said, and I'm curious about what everyone thinks. Because for me, I've heard some of the discussions, and I'm still kind of feeling that we haven't armed our children enough to handle a session with police. I myself struggle with police. And if they're talking to me, I myself, as an adult who has a lot of information, I struggle with them. So I'm curious about, so for me, like, even though I understand the vision and I feel like there's so much good intent behind it, and like you said, Arron, there's, only so many characters that you can fit on a page. So that was a struggle, but I'm curious as to, like, how do we effectively arm our children prior to engaging them with a conversation with a police officer? Putting that into more context is not all children feel safe with police officers, right? You have the kids that recently started the petition for remove SROs out of schools. That is a big thing for a high schooler to come out of their shell and do, right? That tells us that there's something that they don't feel right about. My own kids told me that they don't feel safe around their SRO. So all that I'm saying is that, like, how do we all that I'm asking is, and anyone can please chime in, but how do we effectively arm our children with the facts, with the information, with just the right way to, I don't know how to phrase this, but prior to engaging them and having them, hey, think for yourself, like, they need to be armed with all of the facts prior to doing that, if that makes sense. So how do we do that?
Well, you know what? And before Arron takes the show on this, I love that you pointed that out, the intent, because at the end of the day, it's really about the impact. You have good intentions all day long. And so in my heart, I believe there's no one way to give a whole bunch of foundational information and for kids to be at a great place to really unpack this. There's because it has to be scaffolded. Just because from family dynamics to your experience with the SRO when you was in elementary school, middle school. So the kids are coming in at all different places. And I think that some of the readings that Arron attached may be helpful if, we can find a way of share that with parents to say, this is an opportunity for a family discussion, or our older kids, this is an opportunity for you to read through some material. Just setting some foundational information, I think that would just be very helpful.
And that's the reason why I was actually posted ahead of time, so that they could, dig into and delve into it a little bit. But I'm going to ask you this question. When you were young and, and when you were young and as some of us are parents, who was the first person you told us to go to when we were lost?
I'm going to start because I grew up in South Africa. So the experience is completely different.
Okay.
In South Africa, I was actually I was in college one time, drunk and disorderly. The police officer put me in the back seat. He called my brother and gave me to my brother and said, hey, take her home, go take care of her. So in most cases, they'll just either drop you at home or, just call your family member. So I had a little bit of a different experience, but anyone else can answer.
That probably wouldn't have happened a while ago in South Africa.
I'm a born free, so no, I was born after 1990. So yeah, not my parents or my grandparents' experience. Yeah.
Exactly. So again, I asked that question is that, when we're in the mall or when we're young and we get away from our parents, and we say, hey, go find someone safe. Who a while ago, who would we ask to go to? I had this conversation a little bit ago with my kids, and I said, hey, growing up when you're young and you got, we had that conversation, like, if you ever get separated from me, who do I tell you to go find? And more often than not, it was to go find the police. If we're in the amusement park or we were in the mall and we got separated, it wasn't to go to the next stranger that you walked up to, but to find someone that you felt was safe. At some point, there was a shift, right? And if you watch the first Let's Talk, which was a community conversation, the conversation began with the conversation that Black parents have with their sons, and that's how we started the conversation. And why? Because the conversation never changes. So the conversation I had with my father was the same conversation that my father had with my grandfather, and the same conversation that my grandfather had with my great grandfather. And at some point in time, I felt lied to when I became a teenager and I started having interactions that weren't positive interactions. And then to see the interactions that some of us have, and I was told, very clearly what I need to do to keep safe. And it wasn't to be mouthy, but it was to stay safe so you could wind up living and seeing another day. Do whatever you're asked, keep your hands in plain view, keep your hands up. Don't reach for anything. It was always the same conversation, but to see that even if we do everything right, doesn't mean that something can't go terribly wrong, right? In today's day and age. So how do we have those conversations? How do we make sure that students are safe? So I appreciate it. And I think the one way we're doing it is that by bringing in the ones that some of them are used to seeing on a day-to-day basis, right? So when it's an SRO, they build relationships. That's part of them being a SRO, is to build relationships with students so that they do feel safe. If we were to bring in someone off the beat that they didn't have a relationship with, that was on the panel, they may not be as comfortable, but had to just have open dialogue. The first Let's Talk, those same SROs were part of that Let's Talk. And if you went back to review it, and it is posted, you would see that students opened up and they asked them questions. So I think that's how we build that relationship and build that bridge, is by having them around other adults that be in a safe place to be able to ask those questions. One-on-one probably wouldn't happen, but in a group, and we start out again with the norms. So part of the norms was saying, this is a safe space for you to have the conversation. I think that was really helpful.
Can I actually, sorry, I'm certainly not an educator, but I am a social justice advocate, and I'm the mother of 2 Black boys. It's a difficult, Arron, you mentioned the talk, but what it is for us, the people on this chat, we're pretty resourced. And so even for those of us who are Black, the resources and our education and different things kind of can create its own bubble. And it certainly doesn't remove racism at all from our lives, but we may be a little bit better able to protect our children in various ways based on where we live or where they go to school or who they interact with based on our resources. But what I've tried to do, and my children are now turning 15 and 13, my boys, is we live in Courthouse, so we live across the street from the police station. My older son was the captain of safety patrol when he was in 5th grade at Key School. And he would walk to school and he would see different police officers of different colors, of different genders, different religions. They'd see his captain badge and they'd give him props for it. They'd say, look at you, you're a great kid, walking to school on your own, you're a great kid. And so this is 5 years ago. At the same time, there were a lot of things happening in terms of racial injustice. And the issue was, how do you protect him, but be honest at the same time? And so one of the things that we try to do is to use a lot more positive, right? We're from a society that tries to co-opt Black excellence. And so what we try to do here is when we use the facts, we buffer it with the excellence. and say, this may be how some people may treat you, but do not get it twisted. You are exceptional. And just the fact that you're sitting here with these white kids side to side shows your exceptionality. So maybe other people don't see it, but you have to see it, and you have to wear the confidence of having it. So I know we're getting low on time, but those are the types of things that we try at least to do to balance. And so maybe those are the other things that you can do in any regard when we're talking about these really difficult concepts with young children, or even, you know, older children, to make sure that they recognize their exceptionality simultaneously.
And
Yeah.
things have changed for the police department. And when I was in Arlington growing up, there was a resource officer at Ellery Elementary School. He was part of the team. Okay. And so not putting so much credit on the police department for that, but things were a little bit different when we talk about educating our kids about what the police do, or the careers, or some of the things that they're proactive about. And I'm gonna tell you, the school resource officer, and I'm making a general statement, it's they come with a little bit different mindset because they want to work with kids. They want to be with kids. They come than your street beat officer that's working midnights. Okay. But I still go back to is the professional learning. We're talking about police and their training. These are some of the things that we need to be focusing on, and in addition to supporting our kids and how they feel about the situation, not changing their perception, but helping them work through their feelings about what's going on around us in our community, because we all need to be working towards that same goal, not just the police, our county services, all of us, but just try to strengthen that commitment to our kids, and what that looks like is going to be, I think, the big lift in all of this.
Definitely. And just as we close out, I'd like to give everyone like a opportunity to, you know, say any last thing that you'd like to say. But I just want to thank everyone for this discussion. I think this is something that we can talk about for hours and hours and hours.
Yes.
But ultimately, I think I don't think, I know, Arlington for Justice, Black Parents of Arlington, and Justice Forward Virginia, and I'm sure a lot of other groups are available to help, be a resource to you guys. I know you're pretty new to the community, so whatever you need, we're here. I said this when I had discussions with the police, and I'll continue to say it. Not all of these discussions are going to be comfortable. Not all of them are going to be easy. And not all of them are going to feel like you're not being attacked. Like, you're not always going to feel like I'm not being attacked. But at the end of the day, we're just here for the work. We're here for the people. So we're always going to be here to support. But yeah, anyone wants to say any final things in our last 2 minutes?
I'll go real quick and let Arron finish it off for our APS. But I just want to thank you all. Thank Arron for actually sending me the invite so I can join and really hear, with my own ears, how you all felt. And Bradley, thank you for those statistics on Arlington. They're very interesting, especially with that 9% number and those high numbers for African Americans. I mean, it's something that's mirrored all over the country, but I was really shocked to hear about Arlington. And also to Whytni. Whytni, I just wanted to say, you mentioned one word today, and I wanted to come back to it. You said, when we saw it as outsiders, you're not outsiders with us. And so basically from this conversation, I'm pretty sure Arron will continue that conversation, we're partners. And so basically that's why we're partnering in this conversation right now, to make sure we can move this whole thing forward. And my sister, Miss Jackson, over there, she put it very well as well. So we're not outsiders, we're partners. And so I could consider this a partnership after this phone call. And I look forward to working with you all through Arron and with Arron and face to face as well when it's safe to do so. But at the same time, like I said, you guys, like I said, I'm new here as well. I'm new to Arlington Public Schools. But again, I work for all of you. And so basically, we just want to be helpful, but you're no longer outsiders, you guys are partners, okay? You're welcome.
So again, thanks for the opportunity to come and kind of explain the reason why. Always is important as you go back to why. Just knowing that, trust we want to build trust within APS. We know that trust with the police, trust with APS, we can always do better. And we're here to do better. We're here to learn. We're here to learn and listen. I don't know. I don't have all the answers, but we're always willing here to try and to listen and be collaborative. And I hope that you can see from us is that our intentions are always good. Intentions are positive for APS. And we want to be here for all of our students, including those students that are marginalized and underserved populations. We have to be there, including the students that, are immigrants and speak a second language. And we want to make sure that this is inclusive. And we talked about mental health, and we know that's a big concern and a big issue. As we move forward, mental health for our students right now with the pandemic, as well as Racism 2020, it's going to be Maslow's right now, and trying to make sure our social emotional students are prepared to be able to learn. And this is part of that process for them, because we have to make sure that they're healed. We have to heal them, and all the adults, it's our responsibility, it's our job. It was our parents before, and now it's us. And now it's our students that are coming behind us. So I just want to thank you. I'm here to support you all in any way, and I know that you are here to support me. So I appreciate your time.
Thank you, everybody.
Can I give a quick plug?
Yeah.
Are we done? Or can I give a quick plug?
Oh, go
Give your
ahead.
plug.
Okay, so everybody is kind of new. Nobody's new to the issue of racism. I mean, a lot of white people are, but to be totally candid.
Okay.
But what people are new to is this idea of kind of totally overhauling our criminal justice system. And it's so new to people. It's new to legislators even. You would be amazed. Criminal justice is all done at a state level, mostly. And even our legislators know nothing about it. The group that I run, Justice Forward Virginia, we've been doing this summer explainer series. It's called Get Informed About Police Reform. So we've done two of them already. We've got one tomorrow. It's about civilian oversight of law enforcement. So civilian review boards. And then and that's going to be great. We've got all the experts and the top organizers from Virginia, from the Richmond Transparency and Accountability Project and the Legal Aid Justice Center. It's going to be awesome. You should tune in. And then next week, relevant to this conversation, we're doing a panel on police in schools. So as much as we've been talking about police being present in schools, our position is, and this is again kind of a new thing to a lot of people, is that we shouldn't have police in schools. So it would provide that opposite perspective on what should police presence be in a school system. So, and we're going to keep doing this until this special legislative session in August that starts on August 18th. So, want more information? Arlington for Justice is good for it always, and we are too. So, follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, or whatever. That's whatever I'm supposed to say about all that thing. So,
Thank you, Gregory.
I leave that to Yolande and people who actually understand social media.
Please join it. We'll be hosting a watch party on Arlington for Justice's page as well for Brad's sessions every week. So join it. It's very informative. I've watched every single one of them, and it's amazing. If you're really, really, honestly, like Brad likes to say, there's people who want to kind of gawk at what's going on, and there's people who want to do the work. So if you're really about doing the work, join those sessions to understand what's really going on. And follow Arron Gregory at APS Equity, please, to understand what Arlington Public Schools is doing as well. But yeah, thank you all for joining this. We hope to continue the discussions at a later stage. For everyone on the live today, Whytni and I's chats will be every Tuesday. So hop on, same time, same place next Tuesday. But yeah, thank you so much. Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.